The question is this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Barton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to support this bill and move an amendment circulated in my name. And the amendment goes like this: that all words after that be omitted with a view to substituting the following words. Whilst not declining to give the bill a second reading in the House, we note that A, these changes are necessary due to tens of thousands of Australians who remain stranded overseas, including many Australian pensioners, and B, Australian pensioners stranded overseas have been let down by the government due to delays in vaccine rollout and lack of specialist quarantine facilities, and 2, calls on the government to A, do more to bring Australian pensioners stranded overseas home by accelerating the vaccine rollout and establishing specialised quarantine facilities, and B, not cut the pension. Pensioners have worked hard and contributed all their lives. They deserve our respect. The age pension is a proud Labor legacy. The first iteration of age pension was introduced by the Deakin Labor government in 1908. It sought to ensure that older Australians could live with dignity. I was raised by pensioners. They taught me the value of respect. They taught me the value of hard work. They taught me the value of money, the importance of saving, planning and budgeting. Penny saved, penny earned. That's what pensioners do. They've worked hard. They've helped create a fundamental way of life, as we know in this country today. They've looked after us, whether as children or grandchildren. They budget carefully, and they deserve our respect, Mr Speaker. Labor will always work to strengthen and improve the pension. And over the last 8 years, Labor has sought to protect the pension from the government's relentless cuts to the pension and relentless attempts to cut the pension. Retirement can be an anxious time. All of us understand that. And the past year has been a time like no other, with extra health precautions, lockdowns, spending more time at home, reliance on food and grocery delivery services, and the need to purchase additional health products. It's been a particularly hard year for pensioners in meeting their added cost of living, especially for the people of the Victorian and Melbourne area, but of course right across the country. Australian pensioners should be able and are able to continue to receive their pension overseas should they wish. To that end, pensioners with 35 years of Australian working life residence can receive the full base rate of the pension while overseas indefinitely. One of the great things about this social security system in Australia is its portability. Pensioners with less than 35 years Australian working life residence will receive a proportional rate after 26 weeks overseas. Recent events, the COVID-19 pandemic, have seen Australian pensioners stranded overseas through no fault of their own. Temporary arrangements were introduced to allow extensions to pension portability, meaning pensioners could continue to retain the full right while overseas for longer than 26 weeks. The changes in this bill will enable for these arrangements to continue by providing the Secretary with the discretion to continue the full rate in prescribed circumstances. It is the kind of common sense flexibility that should be built into our social security system. Of course, these changes are necessary to the tens of thousands of Australians who remain stranded overseas, including many Australian pensioners. Australian pensioners stranded overseas have been failed by this neglectful government due to the severe delays in the vaccine rollout and the failure to establish specialist quarantine facilities, the responsibility, Mr. Speaker, of the federal government. Labor has consistently called for the establishment of specialist quarantine facilities. Over a year since the beginning of the pandemic, and these facilities have still not been delivered. For over a year, the government stubbornly inexplicably refused to acknowledge its responsibility in quarantine, and it has been dragged kicking and screaming to accept this responsibility. This is a government that has simply not treated the vaccine rollout with any urgency. The Prime Minister said it is a race. Well, it is a race. In fact, I've just come from the Aboriginal Medical Service here in Canberra getting my second vaccine. It is a race against further variants. It is a race to save lives, and it's a race to save livelihoods, as my colleague just agreed. And it is a race that Australia is losing. And stranded Australians are paying the price, including Australian pensioners who are particularly vulnerable during this pandemic due to their age and health status. Of course, it is not the first time pensioners have been let down by this government. Pensioners will never forget that before the government took power, it pledged to cut the aged pension. But the first opportunity they had to cut the pension, and over the past 8 years, the government has cut or tried to cut the pension time and time again. And Labor will consistently fight this. And Labor has fought every single one of these cuts, tooth and nail. Cuts to the pension are part of the government's thinking, part of the government's being, and part of the government's DNA. As recent as August last year, the government was caught out by Labor on this pension freeze for 2.5 million pensions. Labor fought the government disrespectful and cruel pension freeze. The reality is that pensioners plan for their twice-yearly indexation, one in 20th March and one in 20 September. The freeze took effect in September, and they made pensioners wait to October budget before announcing any kind of relief. We have also seen the government try to shortchange pensioners through the pension deeming rates mechanism. And let me assure you, pensioners understand deeming rates very, very well. Deeming rates are used to determine how much pensioners earn from their secured financial assets, typically savings, for the purpose of determining their eligibility under the income test for a pension. The upper deeming rate in Australia at this point in time is 2.25%, and the lower deeming rate is just 0.25%. If you are single, the first $53,000 of your financial assets has a deeming rate of 2.5% applied. Anything over $53,000 is deemed to earn the other rate of 2.25%. If you're a member of a couple and at least one of you get a pension, the first $88,000 of your combined financial asset has a deeming rate of 0.25%, and anything over $88,000 is deemed at the other rate of 2.25%. With the cash rate nearing 0%, currently 0.1%, it is impossible to see how pensioners could safely earn 2.25% on their savings. With the government deeming pensioners to earn more than they really are, pensioners are receiving less for their pension. And whilst the Minister might disagree with that, it is absolutely the case. Pensioners are being shortchanged by the government's unreasonable and unrealistic pension deeming rates. Pensioners won't forget this government's record on cutting the pension. The Liberal and Nationals are obsessed with cutting the pension, attempting to cut the pension in every budget every year. In 2014, they tried to cut the pension indexation, a cut that would have meant pensioners would be forced to live on $80 a week less within 10 years. That is a lot of money in any terms, and it is particularly a lot of money for pensioners. In 2014, they capped $1 billion from the pensioner concessions, support designed to help pensioners with the cost of living. In 2014, they axed the $900 senior supplement to self-funded retirees receiving the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. In 2014, they tried to reset deeming rate thresholds, a cut that would have seen 500,000 PARP pensioners made worse off. In 2015, they did a deal with the Greens to cut the pension to around 370,000 pensioners by as much as $12,000 a year by changing the pension assets test. In 2016, they tried to cut the pension to around 190,000 pensioners as part of a plan to limit overseas travel for pensioners to just 6 weeks. In 2016, they tried to cut the pension by over 1.5 million for over 1.5 million Australians by scrapping the energy supplement for new pensioners. They spent 5 years trying to increase the pension age to 70. As Social Service Minister and member for Cook, the current Prime Minister, tried to cut the pension as well, and we will not forget that. As Treasurer, the member for Cook tried to cut the pension. As Prime Minister, the member for Cook also tried to cut the pension. In conclusion, Mr Speaker, 8 years of cuts to the pension from the government, and the government has only acted when it's been caught out on its cuts. Our pensioners deserve better than that, and Labor will continue to protect the pension. We will continue to fight the government's cruel cuts to the pension, and Labor will always ensure that pensioners continue to live with the dignity and respect they deserve. In final conclusion, Mr Speaker, I have moved the second reading amendment circulated in my name that goes to overseas stranded pensioners and also the point of no cuts to the pension and acting on vaccine and quarantine as quickly as possible to make sure we can bring those people home.
Is the amendment moved by the member for Barton seconded? The member
I
for Franklin.
second the amendment and reserve my right to speak.
It is seconded. So the original question was this bill be now read